The greatest promise of democracy is that it offers society opportunity for peaceful transfer of power after free, fair, credible, and acceptable election that enable citizens to make choices that will shape their destiny. And so at the heart of that stands the Independent National Electoral Commission, established by the Constitution under Section 153 and derives its power directly from the Constitution. As we look at what Supreme Court did, what led to this debate, to be very clear, Section 160 of the Constitution of the Fatherland made INEC a regulator of elections in our country. And the first duty of a regulator is rulemaking all over the world. And the Constitution ensured that when it provided that of all the 14 executive bodies established under Section 153, the Independent National Electoral Commission shall have the power to make its own rules or otherwise regulate its own procedure that shall not be subject to any authority, including the president. That is the power donated to the EMB of our country. And went further under the 10th schedule, paragraph 15, to declare that INEC has the power to organize, to undertake, and to supervise those who study organization. You know that. You know the power of organizing. Inherent the power to organize is inherent to make rules. And of course, the National Assembly, the Act under Section 148 went for that to complement the Constitution, that the INEC shall make regulations and guidelines to give effect to the provisions of the Electoral Act for the conduct of elections. Therefore, regulations, guidelines made by INEC pursuant to that power have been made constitutionally and has the force of law as subsidiary legislation. Now, the quest to have vote count, given our historical past of rigged and manipulated elections, that led to effort before we came to INEC, by past leaders, specifically started from the time of Dr. Abel Gubadia, who established the ICT unit, first as a unit in his office. Our former Attorney General, Director of Information, Wale Ozi, was in the commissioners at the time, and later became a full-fledged department, realizing the fact that every institution or society that fails to embrace technology innovation will be overtaken by the chaos or decay and decline. And so, to sanitize the process, they started with the OMR. Those of who wrote JAM those days, that's what we used to do. That's what they started with. Because if a history of a system of innovation is not understood, abuse is inevitable. And that's what we are seeing in our country today. And so by 2010, When we came on board under the chairmanship of Ataru Jega, and you have our professor who was also a technical advisor and later became a national commissioner, when he came on board, and interestingly, Jega was a member of the Waste Committee. I was the secretary of the Coalition of Democrats for Electoral Reform that was sponsored, facilitated by the current president. I was the secretary. Chief Oyego was the chairman. Many who later became governors. We were part of that. So we had some knowledge of the challenges of our electoral process. Jega was in waste. So by the time we came in 2010, we were very clear. We were on the ground running as to what to be done to remove the poetry of our election from the refrain of rigging, frustration, violence, and pains, that we must go for the e-voting system. The e-voting system has 4 tracks. 4 tracks, 4 pillars, which are biometric registration of voters, electronic accreditation, electronic balloting, and the last thing will be e-transmission. You recall that when we came on board a few months of the elections, we had to deal with the mischief under section 49, which was an election rigging provision that says the presiding officer, once anybody comes before him, he issues him or her ballot paper to go and vote when we're under manual registration process. That was when politicians were housing voters' card everywhere. What do we need to do? You remember that we have to do what we call separate time for accreditation and separate time for voting, so that we can know the total number of accredited voters before the voting. You come and do accreditation in the morning, by 12 in the noon you come for voting. You all knew the problem that we were faced with that. All over the world, it's supposed to be simultaneous. But that was the first step we took. Then immediately we did successful compilation of biometric register of Nigerians. And we moved away from the old method where every 4 years people were called out to come and register. That was accomplished. So by 2015, introduced the smart card reader. Smart card reader was not a machine, it was just a device to deal with section 49, because there was resistance of election lawmakers that section must remain because it's for rigging. So we need to introduce the card reader to perform 3 functions: verify, confirm, and authenticate whoever that is before you, because the provision that says that a president, once is satisfied, what satisfies him? There was no objective criteria. We dealt with that, and we introduced the smart card reader. And so, under the Jiga's leadership, we were able to accomplish the first 2 stages to 2 pillars: biometric registration of voters, authentication, and all that. And by 2019, we had to use the smart card reader by even upgrading both the software and the hardware on account of the challenges we have witnessed in the previous elections, to give meaning and purpose to the ballot as the best means of the expression of the will of the people in a democracy. Today, it's a tragedy that we are back to something that we pioneered in 2012. Interestingly, Director Chidi, when Jega leadership came on board, we came on board. The first e-transmission under the Jega leadership was carried out in Cross River State. I was the commissioner in charge for the second term election of Governor Lie Imoke. Chidi and his team, brilliant guys we have in the ICT, in headquarters, conjunction with the one at the state level. They came to Cross River State. In my office, just like on that board you are seeing on the dashboard of the 18 local government of Cross River State, I sat in my office. Amazing. Results were being transmitted from the local government from the wards as they were completed. Once voting, procedure, and all that. It was going on for the 18 local governments way back in 2012. We had done that. Chidi is here to confirm that as a pilot. At that time, there is section 52 of the Act, a roadblock that there should be no use of electronic means at all. If those who are going to be regulated by law are the one making the law, what do you expect? There will be statute sabotage and statute capture. They put that law there, that there should be no use of this thing. So we piloted it and kept it. And so, by the time we left office, and again I returned under the Mahmoud Yakubu's commission, that trajectory was followed positively with the introduction of the bimodal voter acquisition system to improve on the issue of the car reader. But remember that when the issues of 2015 election went to the court, the apex court of the land declared that car reader is a beautiful device. However, it should have been written in the Electoral Act. That was the argument. We have forgotten section 160 that gives INEC power to adopt a procedure. There are difference between procedural and non-procedural matters. It's a procedural matter that the Constitution says INEC has the power to do. They came up with that argument. But the Yakubu Mahmoud leadership brought the beavers. We should also improve on accreditation fundamentally. Address the issue about, you remember that after voting before, there is issue about what they call a unused ballot. We eliminated unused ballot right from the time of the car reader and the beavers. It was the same commission. There's what we call tender ballot. Nigeria were losing so much money in printing tender ballots. We eliminated all of that with technology. Today, people are fighting technology that have saved so much money for our country. And so, with the beavers, you can do accreditation. The results data could be sent, and the scanned copy of Form EC8A could now be sent to the IRF. The decision to bring IRF was to stand as a deterrence to the manual process of proceeding from polling unit to work collection center to local government when result will be changed. But the moment you have transmitted that, the work collection officer, without having communication with the presiding officer who could have changed the result, he would have seen the result there. That was the whole idea of the IRF. And that was used to conduct over 105 elections successfully before some of us left office in 2022, before the 2023 elections. All the issues that were taken to tribunal had to do with certificate, had to do with about primaries, no longer about INEC. That was the path we were following. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court decision after the 2023 election, which I need to speak about here, now made that opinion that it should have been written, the IREP is now a mere viewing center or an amusement platform. Unbelievable. The question is, what happens to which are thrown up the status of the IREP, the legal status of the IREP? I've had conversation with one or two judges of the Supreme Court. He was not a member of that panel. He didn't disagree with my view. That if the Constitution, because INEC derives its power directly from the Constitution, not the Electoral Act. We have rules of court that must be obeyed by lawyers in filing your process. And that the power of INEC making no regulation has the force of law. They are subsidiary legislation. And that decision is what has thrown us into the debate we are having today. Because Section 60, subsection 5, as it was then in the 2022 Electoral Act, that gives INEC we say that the presiding officer shall transmit the result in the manner prescribed by INEC. The question would be asked, did INEC make prescription? The answer is yes. And it's contained under paragraph 38 of the regulations and guidelines. Regulations and guidelines are gazetted. We say that where the result in the IREP or what is contained from the CA is not consistent, is not in tandem with what's in the IREP, IREP should take precedence, because IREP have been seen by everybody. But in order to help politicians, the court came to that unfortunate decision. It was a quest to now have it in the Electoral Act that has led to this whole debate. And do you know that because of this that happened now, some provisions that were supposed to be pillars have been removed right now. In the 2026 Electoral Act, they have removed some of the provisions. Go and check section 137 of the 2022 Electoral Act and compare to go and see what is now in 2026. You recall that under section 137, on the basis of the historical past, INEC made substantial contribution to that 2022 Electoral Act. In fact, I must tell Nigerians here that the 2022 Electoral Act is the most progressive, the most comprehensive Electoral Act in our history. So profound. But you know what? They have removed section 137. What does 137 says? You recall that when people go to court, there's argument by court that dumping. You dump document, you come and explain, and all of that. Now, the question is, look, all INEC document, any document of INEC that does not have code is not an INEC document. All INEC documents are coded. They are all operational documents. No document that is not coded, that has no serial numbers. So, the proposal we made that was accepted by the National Assembly that led to 137 in 2022 was that where there's a complaint about non-compliance and all of that, if the original document or certified copy, even by consent admitted, there shall be no need for oral evidence, which is what they normally use. That, document were called. We needed to call someone to come and explain those documents. The section now says it will not be necessary. If those complaints are manifest on the face of the document, like the one you were seeing on television, where they were mutilated, that the parties could make address on it, and the court duty bound to read them. They have removed it now from the current 2026 Electoral Act. And so, it is that effort that led to the controversy about the new proviso. And I want to say this here. This is my opinion. And that is that this proviso is a complete regression, a setback to the threshold that we have crossed in order to give meaning to the ballot in our country. And I'll read it, and I will show to you the attitude of Supreme Court authority when it has to do with proviso. When there's a proviso, what has the Supreme Court have been saying? I just give you only one out of the many to tell you that today, what you have is manual collation. The mere mention of IREV now is immaterial, because the section says, let me read the section. The presiding officer shall electronically transmit the result from each polling unit to IREV portal, and such transmission shall be done after the prescribed from ECA has been signed and countersigned by the presiding officer and by the candidate or polling agent where available at the polling unit. But here is the killer proviso. Provided that in all cases, underline, in all cases, the Form EC 8A shall remain the primary source of collation and declaration of results. That is what it has said. What they pretended to give with one hand have been removed clearly. What our oracle, the Supreme Court, what is the attitude of the court when there's a proviso? Supreme Court in Abegunde, versus Ondo State House of Assembly, just one, 2015, 8 weekly Nigerian law report, part 314, page 7327. The Supreme Court said, whenever there's a proviso inserted after a provision, he said the aim is to derogate from the intendment of the statutory provision. It's an exception. You can't do anything. So discretionary power, because who determines whether there's no network? And if we are in court, who can bring evidence of the fact that at the material time, this is evidence that there was no network that was why I did not transmit. Is that possible? Who's going to do that? So what has been done is a tragedy. And that's why I say that a calamity befalls a nation when its citizens rationalizing what is wrong, who, because of what they have, the position they occupy today, undermine tomorrow. This is what has happened. We are back to where we were before 2022 Act. If they have left it as it was, giving INEC that latitude to prescribe as it used to be, that would have been fine. Just like the way they went to mention smart card reader in the Electoral Act. Do you need to mention Electoral Act in a device, in a statute? INEC said, in any electronic device. That should have been the language. Now we now have a BVAS. BVAS is not, when they were mentioning it, there was no BVAS. A judge in one tribunal said, what I can see here is a smart card reader. BVAS is not known to the law. So how long are we going to continue on this path? So I want to say that it's judiciary that has brought us to where we are today. And so, but what is the value? What is the value of e-transmission to the electoral management result valuation? Clearly, it can be summed up in 3 words: trust, efficiency, and security. You see, transparency and accountability is very important. Real-time transmission of results empowers citizens to track the electoral process, fostering a unprecedented level of transparency and accountability, because citizens will lose trust and confidence if a law, a process that ought to have brought transparency is made conditional and not guaranteed, as exemplified by the proviso under section 60, subsection 3, as couched. Number 2 is accuracy and efficiency. That's the greatest valuation of the requirement for e-transmission to the IRM, because it minimizes the risk of human error, ensuring accurate and expedient announcement of result. Today, many and out there believe that their participation will not bring about influence or meaningful outcome. And that is why the recent election conducted here, 14.24% turnout. In AMAC, 7.8%. It's what we call citizen disengagement. And when that happens, democracy is in danger. And of course, enhance credibility. These are the benefits of it. Now, what are the issues that dominated the debate, the needless debate? One of the issues were raised was about the infrastructure, that we don't have the infrastructure. Very unfortunate. Since the year 2000, they didn't know that it was an indictment on the telcos. It was when the debate was going on that I decided to break my silence. That look, at this point in time, let me say something. Our rice man, they've all been calling over the years. You know, I said, no, I don't want to say anything about the country. Good night to Nigeria. But I needed to provide that information. That look, as at 2018, gentlemen, 2018, when the debate that led to the 2022 Act was on, you know, INEC was sidelined in the debate at the National Assembly. The telcos were not invited. And the question I asked, that why people behave like these American people who are always discussing about the right of abortion, and only men are always usually seated in a committee. Do men get pregnant? And as a commission, under Jega leadership, a very comprehensive statement was issued to the effect that INEC, because you discussed INEC readiness, you didn't invite INEC. INEC was ready, technology available. Nigerians overwhelmingly have been reaching out to the commission, are in support, and what was left was the legal framework. That was what, you remember that in National Assembly, before the 2022 Act was passed, they voted against the retransmission. Remember, there was a vote that was carried out. It was when we now spoke, they now decided to give the commission the latitude. The only a meeting point was to say, okay, section 60, subsection 5, in the manner prescribed by the commission. That was what led to that. We must get the history right. And INEC went ahead, pursuant to the power given as a regulator to the exclusion of any other body in this country. Today, why should we be talking about that? So, really, that's not an issue. They talk about, and in fact, INEC in that report made it clear, NCC, INEC, Technical Committee on Election E-Transmission, gave a report on 93% coverage. 93% coverage as at 2018. The 7% will be ready by 2019. Recall that President Muhammad Buhari, for good 4 times, rejected because we were ready to fly at that time. 2019 became the only year since 1999 that there was no Electoral Act. And it was deliberate. It was deliberate. And so, it was now hope that with that latitude given to INEC, established, founded the regulations, we were good to go in 2023. It was on the basis of that. Do I say I should regret the role I played? That when I left the commission, I called John Momo, I called Dr. Bagbena, our late Dokwesi, and I said, look, please, sir, I don't want consultancy from anybody. I have been inundated. I was on television. Itodo was doing his election 101 and all that, side by side. And I was on television. Ozi, all of us, today, since after 2023, when the glitch could not be explained, I'm still being held accountable. You want to recall that was the first election that Nigerians across the world, they were all coming home, buying tickets to come home. But Papa Awo, I remember what Awo said in 1986. When Babangida called him to come and participate in the political bureau to chart a new forward after he came to office, Papa said because of his experience, that whenever we think that the new dawn will come, we'll be disappointed. We were all disappointed. Today, Nigerians are calling me. What happened? What happened? What I couldn't explain. I've led the system. So the point being made here is this. Stakeholder engagement. I thought that the commission, the correct commission, should be explaining to the Nigerian people. If you cannot come out because of the, when you now got to the point of partisan tone, you could issue a statement like we did under our watch, because we didn't want to be seen to be in the arena of partisan argument. That INEC should be at the forefront. You must protect your independence as a body. INEC was completely absent. Could not speak to the Nigerian people as to the claim that we're making about INEC, that INEC was not ready. Finally, as I conclude, the pathway to e-transmission is that even if you have the e-transmission removing the proviso, the attitude of the court is our greatest problem. That's my constituency. Charity must begin from home. And I've been calling my colleagues, both at the bar and the bench, that the viability of democracy lies in a very courageous judiciary that is independent, that be ready to call justice by its own name. That the first early victim of the subversion of democracy is the rule of law. When the court fails to hold political elite accountable, it is the rule of law that gives viability to the practice of democracy. But where the judiciary shows signs of collapse, signs of weakness, or signs of irrelevance, democracy will be in peril. Democracy without the rule of law is nothing but the coming together of men of the most vicious who will determine what they want. A judiciary that was very audacious under the military, this should not happen because they also don't follow the Act of National Assembly. Even despite Section 137, do you know that in Lawa versus Matawale, the Section 137 that do not require call of oral evidence what the document shows was applied. But in Igodalo versus INEC, the court said, no, they forget about Section 137. That inconsistency is a problem. Sanctity of the law is key to the practice of democracy. Justice Ademola had always called, even during the military time, that judges should not be seen to blow muted trumpets. They must stand tall and mighty in defense of democracy and the rule of law. The electronic transmission of election result is more than a technological upgrade. It should be seen as a vital component of the Nigerian democratic DNA. By harnessing its potential, we can, ensure credible elections, reinforce democratic legitimacy, safeguard the vote, and ultimately bequeathing to ourselves and for future generations whose faces we are yet to see, whose name we may never know, all of whom should be able to say that in our own time, we gave to them and left behind one thing, which is nothing but the heritage of a resilient democratic system for them. I thank you all.